Welcome to episode 320 of the Ski Podcast, and thanks for joining us, listener. I'm your host, Ian Martin, and today we're going to be finding out how a Brit got elected onto the Méribel Town Council, how the summer ski season in Les Alpes went, plus we'll be finding out about the Travelski Night Train to the Alps. We also have the latest from the season down under in Australia and New Zealand, your feedback, and well, that's today's podcast. Right, let's meet today's guests. Regular listeners will know my first guest voice very well, thanks to her excellent snow reports from Les Alpes, where she runs Tip Top Ski Coaching. I am delighted to welcome Alex Armand to the podcast. Hi, Alex. How are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm well, although we're actually recording this the night after England got knocked out of the World Cup. So I was
sad.
Driving in a motorhome at the time, so I didn't really get to see it. Probably that was just as well. Let me ask you, Alex, where are you based right now?
Right now, I'm at the foot of the Mont Ventoux in Bédoin. And then in the winters, I live in Bourg d'Oisans and ski in Les Alpes.
Cool. Well, we'll be coming back to both of those destinations shortly, but let me introduce my second guest. He is making his third appearance on the show. We chatted about après ski bans in the Alps in episode 86, and in episode 180, he shared his insights on how to find a ski job post-Brexit. More recently, he's become the first Brit to be elected onto the Méribel Council, something we'll be finding out about later. I'm delighted to welcome back Richard Lett. Hi, Rich. How are you?
Hey, Ian. Yeah, very good. Thank you. From sunny Méribel.
Right, I was going to ask you where you are, but you're in Méribel at the moment. And how has it been? Have you had a canicule in the same way that we've had a heat wave over here?
We have, but you always get the breeze here. You get a nice cooling breeze in the evening. It's been hot, but yeah, and if you're in the shade, if you go like do some sport in the trees or whatever, you get a breeze. So it's not so bad.
Cool. And there's the odd mountain lake to dip into if you're feeling too hot.
You can't keep me out of them.
Excellent. Well, a question I always like to start off with, my guess, is when did you ski or snowboard last? And Alex, I'm pretty sure I can guess where and maybe not necessarily when it was, but do tell us.
So where was Les Alpes Glacier, of course. And just a couple of weeks ago, so the glacier only closed on the 6th of July. I wasn't there for the closing day because I was here cycling in Provence, but I was there just a few days before the closing day. So the end of June for me.
Well, we'll come back to what skiing in Les Alpes is like in summer a little bit later on. What about yourself, Rich? When was your last day on snow?
Yeah, I think it was I'm not sure if it's exactly the last day of the season, but one of the last days of the season. We got some fresh snow at the top and then got some lovely transition snow lower down, and it was an epic last day. Did the whole three valleys. It was great.
Fantastic. I do like the atmosphere at the end of the season when there are fewer guests around. The staff tend to be relaxing. You can have great days out like that. Now, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you're possibly sweltering in a heat wave or canicule right now. But on the other side of the world, it's winter. So let's hear from Australia and New Zealand expert Rachel Oakes-Ash on the latest situation down there.
Thanks, Ian. Wish I had better news, but it does feel like winter is in a holding pattern down under. There is hope, snow, then there's despair, warm spring temperatures, and they're all playing havoc for snowmakers and groomers across the Aussie resorts. But they're handling it with grace and good humour, as is the Aussie way. The predicted snowfall last week did come in on the weekend, but it delivered, unfortunately, about half of what we had hoped. But obviously enough for resorts to push and farm snow, to get the snow guns pumping and start to get more terrain open in the always busy school holidays. Resorts are opening new chairlifts and terrain on the daily, but our tip is ski in the morning on the fresh groomers for the next week or so and enjoy the blue skies before afternoon skiing gets too heavy. In other words, head in early for après. We've got about 2 weeks of high pressure hanging above us. Next snowfall is unlikely to happen until August, sadly. Now, New Zealand has finally got all resorts open as well. Mackenzie area scored that 80 centimetre snowstorm last week that we were talking about. Mount Lyford, north of the South Island, they did well with over a metre. And Mount Hart had a record 10,000 visitors over the 3-day long weekend because of their mega snowfall as well. The Otago resorts further south of Queenstown and Wanaka, well, they're chugging along. They all still need more snow, but don't we all? And snow snowmaking is keeping everything pristine, and more terrain over there is opening on the daily. Cardrona's actually been able to open the Soho Basin, which is fantastic news. The high-pressure system that I mentioned before, it's just moved in like our housemate's cousin that doesn't pay rent, and it means there could be some rain, which will cause snow high up. Meanwhile, in Chile, let's not mention the 4-metre snowstorm heading to Portillo that has forced road and resort closures. Oh, booking flights now.
Thanks to Rachel for that update. It sounds tough in Australia. A small point, listener. I recently recorded a special interview with Rachel, which is well worth listening to. She is so interesting, a born storyteller. I'll put a link in the show notes to that so you can catch up with it. Now, if you listen to episode 318, you'll know that Guy Beatson is based in Whakapapa in New Zealand this winter. So let's hear how their winter is shaping up.
Kia ora again, Ian, from Whakapapa, on the northern side of Mount Ruapehu here in New Zealand. Last time I was on, the mood was cautious optimism, still waiting on a proper winter base. Well, the weather's started to deliver. A cold front last week brought over 30 centimetres of snow, and the upper gullies are filling in. The very top still wants more natural snow, but the snowmaking's superb. The best start in 3 or 4 years. Snowland pulled 1,700 people in a day over the Matariki weekend, that's the Māori New Year, which fell midway through our 2-week school break, so the mountains packed with families. Turo had a cracking weekend too. The forecast keeps it rolling. More snow up top on Thursday, a fine weekend, and then another dump on Sunday. Down south, the South Island's further along. Coronet Peak's got all its lifts spinning, and the outlook favours the higher Canterbury, Mackenzie and Southern Lakes fields at the moment. And now I've taught my very first ski lessons as an instructor. Watching someone lick their first terms and light up, that's the best part of our sport. Back to you, Ian.
We have a little bit of news. Since our last podcast, it's been confirmed that freeride skiing will be included in the 2030 Olympics. Now, if you don't know what this is, you should check out the Freeride World Tour channel on YouTube. This is big mountain skiing. Steep lines, jumps, flips, properly strong skiing. I asked GB Snowsport what their plans were on this, because they're interested if they would be a British team, for example. And they told me they might announce a small GB Snowsport freeride squad for this season, drawn from athletes competing at the upper 2 levels of the Freeride World Tour. And then later on, they'll look at pathways for other athletes. A name to watch out for is Cody Bramwell. Now, he was born in Sweden, but he has a British father. Cody is 31, but he came second in the snowboard category in the Freeride World Tour last winter. He switched to the UK in 2021, and I did a little bit of research and found a quote where he said to be an Olympian would be the craziest dream ever. That would be so cool. So that's going to be really interesting. Those Olympics are going to be held in France across a wide range of resorts. One other point raised by GB Snowsport, the proposed field sizes for those events are going to be very small. I think it's just 22 athletes for male and female events. So it'll be really interesting to see if there's a nation quota cap that might affect selection, might make it a little bit easier to get a British skier or snowboarder in there. More good news for British athletes across the board is that any British Olympians who took part at Milan Cortina are going to be eligible for a €10,000 grant from the IOC. GB Snowsport tell me they're waiting for all the details, but it should apply across the board, which is great news, as we know funding is a constant challenge for most of our athletes. Right, I'm going to move on now to Alex. I wondered, Alex, if we could start with a little bit about you. I know you're based in Ladies Out, and I know you've been there a long time because you've been reporting for us for a long time, but when did you first go out there?
Over 20 years ago, actually. So I went for a 6-week stint, taking a sabbatical from my job in London as a sports development officer, and really never looked back. I went home after my 6 weeks in order to hand in my notice, prepare myself for the next winter, and organise myself to be financially stable, fit enough, and ready to start the process of becoming a ski instructor.
Nice. And so when you went on that initial stint, were you a ski bum or were you working there?
No, half and half, I would say. I managed to get a few jobs here and there to be able to buy some beers, and I'd saved up enough to pay my rent for those 6 weeks.
Nice. Okay. And evidently you fell for Ladies Alp, and you mentioned about getting your instructor qualification. Had you already started on that route? Yeah,
so I had done a season after university in Val d'Isère and done my Basie level 1. I already held my snowboarding qualifications for the dry slopes. I'd done that whilst I was at university and taught regularly at Sheffield back in the day. The level 2 actually happened to happen when I was on my 6-week in des Alpes. So I had a go and did it. And then the following year, I did my level 3.
And that's under the Béziers system. And then you did the French equivalence. Now, I know this is quite a complicated process, but I wonder if you could briefly explain what that entails and how that process does work.
Sure. So for those of you that know the Béziers system, you'll know that there are 4 levels within the Béziers system. Within those levels of the Béziers system includes the European Mountain Security, which is an off-piste course teaching you about not necessarily your own skiing ability off-piste, but more the safety elements. So the snowpack, how to make choices of where to go, how to look after a group in an unpisted, off-piste environment. And then also the famous Eurotest, which we hear a lot about in the British news at certain times. So the Eurotest is a giant slalom race where athletes are calibrated. They open the course and they close the course. And then an average is worked out between their calibration, their opening time and their closing time to give a pass time, which is different for men and for women. And then that pass time is the pass time and you are in or you're out.
And I understand that for people trying to get the qualification, this is often the biggest limiter. Had you done a bunch of racing beforehand, maybe at university or something?
No, I'd never ski raced. When I realized that I wanted to be a ski instructor, I prioritized race training as well as other things. And I loved the race training. Living life as an athlete is just like the perfect life. I'm also competitive, so getting to the bottom quick is something that comes as a natural want to me. I wouldn't say a natural achievement, but a natural want. And it was fantastic. Now, I think it taught me a lot about skiing, the training towards the Eurotest, taught me a lot about technical skiing, taught me a lot that I could take back into other areas of my skiing and also my teaching, opposed to what we hear a lot in the British press. I'm not sure that I'm fully against the Eurotest. It's not an impossible task. You do need to work hard and you need to train hard, but I learned a huge amount in doing it and enjoyed the experience.
That is really interesting to hear your point of view. You mentioned about the British press. I'm sure that they're necessarily going on about it the whole time. But I guess sometimes people might say, do you really need to drive, let's say, a car fast and to be able to be a driving instructor, to be able to teach someone? But there are all the different elements. And now you've been running Tip Top Ski Coaching in Les Deux Alpes for how long?
Tip Top Ski Coaching has been going for 10 years or so. So previously I worked for other ski schools as a stagiaire to start with and then as a diplômé.
Now, during that time, you've taught my kids in a private lesson at one point. But one of the reasons I wanted to have you on today was to talk to you about Les Deux Alpes summer skiing. You mentioned that your last skiing was on the glacier there. Hopefully listeners are aware that Les Deux Alpes now has one of the longest ski seasons in Europe. There are a couple of places which are open all year round, but Les Deux Alpes opens up early in November. And I think I'm right in saying that the lifts only stopped turning earlier this month, maybe a couple of weeks ago.
Correct. So they stopped turning at the weekend of the 6th of July. In fact, they're still turning, but they're stopped turning for skiing. They're stopped turning for mountain biking and for hikers. And they open the last weekend in November. So we have a really long winter, except we don't call it the winter. We call it a winter season and a spring season. End of November to the end of April is the winter season. And then last day of April, they close that evening for winter. And then the next day, the 1st of May, they open for the spring skiing season. The spring skiing season is amazing. It's basically skiing from 3,400, 600 to 2,600 meters. Nobody there. Amazing snow. The last couple of years, we've had fresh snow overnight, empty pistes. Couldn't be better.
Yeah, that is fantastic. I think just to clarify, maybe for listeners who don't know Les Deux Alpes, I think the resort level is 1,600. So we're talking about the mid-station to the glacier or glacier to mid-station. And that is a decent vertical drop, 100 to 1,000 meters. And the snow at the end of the season was really good. And am I right in thinking that as that spring season, let's say, progresses, the skiable area becomes slightly less?
Yeah, so I think the plan, if you like, and nature obviously has a control on the plan that isn't necessarily in the original plan. But the plan is that May it's to 2,600, and then June it becomes the glacier and the signal lift, actually. So not only the glacier. And then as the signal lift becomes more tricky, then it becomes just the glacier. This year we skied down to 2,600 well into June, in fact, and down the signal towards middle of June. So the glacier area by itself is only really maybe the last 3 weeks of the spring season. But the glacier area itself is big.
Yeah, it's a decent ski area if you compare it to if other people have skied in summer, let's say in Teen or in Zermatt maybe. You've got a lot of variety then. When you can go down to 2.6, that's great. Now, if listeners tuned in for episode 318, they'll know the Carrick-Smith brothers, the young British racers, were training in Ladies Out this summer. Now, I'm a bit confused about this. Maybe you can just confirm, Alex. Am I right in thinking that once it goes into June, the ski area is reserved for athletes, racers only, but the snow park is open for everyone?
No, the glacier itself is open for everyone. So there are areas that are reserved for athletes, and that's from the beginning of May, actually. So there are certain pieces that are kept for lanes, basically, so that people can train. In May, there's also one piece that's kept for Super G, so a much longer piece all the way down to and then the other piece all around are open for the public, and of course the snow park is open for the public as well.
Cool. And that snow park is, I'm thinking, quite rare to have an active snow park going on in summer. It must pull a lot of people in.
The snow park's epic. It's got everything that you can need from making your first jump or first box or rail to being an Olympic athlete and training for your discipline.
Excellent. You've now moved on to Mont Ventoux, as you mentioned earlier. Now, that is an iconic climb in the Tour de France going on at the moment, but I think your focus is not so much on the road biking. It's an experience you're offering for people to discover the area.
Yeah, so we're called Tip Top Bike Tours, and the idea is that you come and ride with the locals. My husband is from Provence originally, born and bred in Provence. And I've fallen in love with and taken all the information from my husband to be able to go and do these tours. And the idea is that we're showing you the countryside. We're tasting the wines, truffles, goat's cheese, all the local produce, and basically being able to see Provence in a slow, chilled, nice way on a bike outside. And you get a very different experience from it than driving around or on a motorbike.
I'm sure you do. It's on my bucket list, not something I've ever climbed. Definitely would like to do it. As I mentioned, it's an iconic climb in the Tour de France. I looked up the height. I think it's quite high, 1,912 meters. I think there's a couple of ski areas on Ventoux.
Yeah, that's correct. So historically, there's a ski area on this side, on the Bedouin side. I'm not so sure that is operational anymore. It's a bike park now, really. And then on the north side, so on the Malocène side, there's an active ski resort. I have to say that I haven't managed to get away from Des Alpes and come and experience the snow here, although they have just had a fantastic season with all the snow that we've had this season. But apparently they've got some good black runs. It's really challenging, nice skiing. And then in the bowl of the resort, it's nice, easy family skiing.
Cool. I'll have to add that one to my list. I think a really interesting one. Maybe you could ski and cycle it on the same trip or something like that.
It's definitely on my list to go and ski it.
That's brilliant, Alex. Thanks so much for that. Rich, just before we move on to you, if it's okay, I'm going to include a short interview I did last week with Daniel Elkan from Snow Carbon. Now, like me, Daniel is always promoting train travel to the Alps. And last winter, he tried out the new Travelski Express Night Train, which goes from Paris to the Tarentaise. Now, I've been on this route back in the day. So long ago, it was a different century. But night trains are seeing a real resurgence right now. And in the last year, I've been to Nice, Innsbruck and Berlin on night trains. So let's have a listen to what Daniel thought of his experience. I'm very excited to be joined by Daniel Elkan today, founder of snowcarbon.co.uk. Lots of fantastic information about train travel to the Alps. Daniel is a real expert. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you today, Daniel, is that you have been on the Travelski Night Train. And I think that some of our listeners might not be aware of this. And I wondered if you could say, when was it that you took the train, and where did you travel to?
Hi, Ian. Yes, indeed, I have. I went in January on the Travelski Night Express from London to Paris, and then Paris on the Travelski Night Express to T.
So you took the Eurostar to Paris, and then it's a night train that leaves from Paris, taking you down to Bourg-Saint-Maurice. What are the timings like for that?
Well, I left London at about 5:30, got to Paris at about 9, had a very relaxed switch of station, had a bite to eat, and then got on the Travelski Express, which left at 11 p.m.
Excellent. And what time did you get into Bourg-Saint-Maurice then?
8:09 a.m. I then got a bus transfer up to Teen, which I'd booked, just booked independently with Altibus. And then I was in Teen about 9:30.
Fantastic. So you're leaving and travelling overnight on a Friday to arrive on a Saturday morning. So I guess one of the benefits of this type of service is an extra day or even 2 days skiing, because in terms of the return service, how did you travel back?
I travelled back on the Travelski Night Express as well. And I would say that there's a difference in terms of, when we talk about overnight trains to the Alps, we often talk about the fact that you can get 2 extra days skiing on your holiday. Ski the day you arrive, ski the day you depart. But I think actually in reality, it's a very different thing. Those 2 days are very different, because if you've travelled overnight outbound, you've been on a train where you're excited and everybody else is excited. And you've probably stayed up, had some beers or some, a meal in the cafe bar. The cafe bar on Travelski Night Express is very nice. It's like a kind of speakeasy feel to it. Drinks are very reasonably priced. The atmosphere is friendly. You can feel like you could probably talk with anyone. I stayed up particularly late that night to kind of experience, all the different food on the menu, try a few drinks, because, you need to know which beers are going to taste like which beers. So I didn't take the best advantage of the ski day, but I think that's often the case for anyone on the outbound journey. You still got to, do your ski hub, perhaps check into your accommodation. So you might kind of get a really good ski from, say, 11 or 12 o'clock. But on the final day, when you know the resort better, you know where everything is, you've got your ski hire already sorted, it's such smooth sailing on that last day to get really, really full extra days skiing. So I'd say it's probably more like 1.5 extra days, and it's just worth considering that, because you don't necessarily have to go outbound and return on the sleeper train. You might say, let's travel out by day and then take the Travelski Express back by night.
Well, I mean, you make some valid points there. I guess it depends how much time you spend in the bar on the way down there as to how it's going to affect your first days there skiing.
Guilty.
One of the things you make there is when they first introduced their train travel to the Alps, you had to buy a Travelski package. And I think one of the points you're making there is you can just get the ticket only and you can combine it. You could go overnight on the way out and catch overland trains via SNCF and Eurostar on the way back. And that ticket only is great for people who are looking for flexible train travel to the Alps. Could you give me an indication of what sort of prices they're charging for those ticket only fares?
When I looked on the Travelski website, when they went on sale, the price was starting at about €99. It depended on which date you were going. If you were going on a more peak date, they were starting at kind of 115 per adult or €81. This is one way.
Oh, I mean, I think those prices are really good when you think that you're going straight into Bourg-Saint-Maurice. And, okay, you went up to Teen, you can go up to Val d'Isère, you can go up to La Rosière, and evidently Les Arcs, you can just hop on the funicular and go straight up to Les Arcs as well. I think this year, another addition is that there's going to be a night train starting in Amsterdam and coming down through Brussels. And I think that'll probably appeal to a lot of British people, because if you went to Paris, for example, you do have to change stations from Gare du Nord. But if you go via Brussels, it's all in the same station. It's much easier. And typically I find that you tend to get less expensive Eurostar fares if you want to travel via Brussels.
I think you're absolutely right. It is more convenient to go via Brussels. Not that the change in Paris is difficult. Price-wise, the tickets to Brussels versus tickets to Paris in terms of the Eurostar, I'm not sure how much difference there is, but certainly the prices that you're seeing on the Travelski Express are excellent. Because if you think at half term, 125 per February half term, 125 one way per adult. That's phenomenal compared to flight prices or many of the other train options. And you combine that with a, booked in advance, reasonably priced Eurostar ticket to Paris or Brussels, and you're doing very well.
And just to clarify, I mean, I think probably most people are aware these days. We have covered it on the podcast before, but you're traveling in couchettes. Typically, you're going to be sharing with 5 other people. If that cabin is full, you can obviously book a whole couchette to yourself. Was there any extra provision on that train for skis or snowboards, or do you need to fit them into your couchette?
You need to fit them into your couchette, but I didn't see, walking up and down that train, I didn't see anyone having a real problem. So,
cool.
It works.
And as you said, it was a great atmosphere. I imagine, the type of people looking to go from Paris or let's say Brussels, overnight, they want to get extra string in. They're probably a bit younger, the clientele on that train as well?
Clientele on that train were 20s, 30s, 40s in the main. There were some young families. I probably saw 3 or 4 young families. The atmosphere, was indeed very nice. And what I liked about the fact of the cafe bar is it was comfortable. It had lots of tables, it had lots of seating, it had a little more open area at the other side of the bar. The lighting was good. It really had a nice feel to it. The music was not loud, because I've been on some Austrian sleeper trains in my days where they played like banging techno or just like really, really cheesy kind of Euro dance music at a horrible level with bad lighting. And it was like, no, this is not the experience. Whereas this was a much gentler, more refined experience, but I think that will suit people.
Cool. And what time did that bar stay open until then?
It didn't close. I met people who, when I got a few hours shut-eye, I think I went to bed at 2, and I thought I'll get up at 5 or 5:30 to see what the breakfast service is like, what's happening there. And I came across the same group of 6 people, which was comprised of a couple and 4 other people who just met randomly in the bar and were having a lovely time. And I was like, have you guys been to bed? They were like, no. And I thought that was so lovely, because they were just having such a lovely time chatting. And that's what these kind of rail adventures are all about. The train is such a social way of traveling. And when train companies like Travelski have done, help that by making a cafe bar that is kind of comfortable and has that lovely kind of lovely feel to it, I think they really encourage people to meet other skiers and just have a lovely social time.
Cool. Well, that's brilliant. So depending what option you want to take, going drinking all night or just sleeping in your couchette on the way down there, new service. I'm going to put links in the show notes so other people who are listening to this can book that for themselves. That's brilliant, Daniel. Thank you so much for that.
My pleasure. Great to chat.
That was really interesting. I should point out that, as you may have guessed, Daniel was outside of the park when we spoke. So apologies if the sound wasn't perfect. Now, that takes us neatly onto my conversation with Rich, as Méribel is one of the destinations you can reach very easily by train, and specifically on that night train. Firstly, Rich, congratulations on being the first Briton to be elected to the Méribel Council. I think maybe there was someone else who crossed the line at the same time as you. Is that right?
Yeah, Sam Langley, so a good friend of mine. She also ran on the mayor's ticket. So, yeah, we're both dead heat over the line together. Yeah.
Cool. I'm also interested. I asked Alex about her background in Les Alpes. And before we discuss the election, I thought it might be useful if you could give listeners some context. We first met when I was organising natives events in the early noughties. So you've been in the Alps and part of that community for a long time. And I mentioned when I referred to your previous appearance in episode 80 that you're very involved in après-ski. But perhaps we could start with a bit about you. Do you want to briefly explain your role now and your journey to that point, if you feel that is possible?
Yeah, sure. So it seems like a long time ago now. But yeah, after leaving uni, just looking for something to do, I decided to do a ski season because I met a bloke in a pub and he'd just done a ski season. I didn't know what one was. I got a job with the much fabled Bladen Line, who I believe you worked for as well, Ian.
Yep.
That was in 94. And then did my first seasons in Val d'Isère and then some summer seasons in Austria. decided I really wanted to move to the Alps year round. So I was basically open to offers to any company that would give me a full year-round contract, and jumped ship to the Brown Rock Group, who at the time owned the Dick's Tea Bar chain. So I worked for them as bar hotel manager and then operations director overseas. We had about 15, 20 locations across the Alps, including Les Deux Alpes and everywhere else. And so that job was very much focused on driving sales. And we found the best way to drive sales was through entertainment and live music and events and DJ nights and things like that. Quid working with natives and anyone that was up for doing events with us, we'd jump at the chance. Well, that group kind of dissolved at a certain point. And then so I decided to go out on my own and basically set up Peace Productions and après ski bands to run these sort of club nights and parties. And we set up the Altitude Festival, and we had the Taking the Peace comedy tours and DJ tours and whatnot. And then from that, après ski bands kind of became this behemoth, just got bigger and bigger. And we organized good sort of 4,000 to 5,000 gigs per year.
So, in fact, I referred earlier, episode 80, when you were talking about après ski bands, and what you do is you source them, you bring them over to the Alps, and then book them gigs in lots of different places. That's what après ski bands does at your company now?
That's the core of the music side of our business. Yeah, we still run events, we still organise festivals and bits and bobs. But yeah, the core of the business, the bit that's really taken off, is après ski bands.
And so if people have been out to the Alps, the Tarentaise, let's say, or other resorts recently, who are bands that you have booked that they might have seen?
Pretty much all of them. So there used to be the good old favourites like Bring Your Sisters, and they're still going, and Queens of the Snow Stage. But obviously we're bringing out a lot of touring bands as well that are only out for a short period of time, like Hot Piece of Brass have been a big hit, and Magnolia and Charge Band. I mean, they're literally, if you go to Cocorico, it's one of our bands. If you go to the Rompoint, it's one of our bands. And the main places work with us for simplicity.
Well, I think you know that my kids booked in the Three Valleys this winter. So you booked at many venues, including others that add in there, the Ski Lodge, amazing events there, Lodge de Village, I think, really good après ski events as well. Let's move on then to the reason I asked you to join us on the podcast today, which is the Méribel Council election. Now, just in terms of taxonomy, I think it's worth clarifying. We're not talking about Méribel, the ski resort, but Méribel, the commune. And the way it works in France is you have a région, which I think in your case is Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes, then the département, which is Savoie in this case, which most people will have heard of. And then each district within that département is organised on a commune level. And in this case, it's not even technically Méribel at all, is it? I think, is it called Les Alus?
It's Méribel Les Alus, to give it its full title. For those that know Méribel, the town hall is actually in Les Alus. So that's kind of the administrative centre of the valley of Méribel.
And so what are the responsibilities of the commune? Because obviously it's different from the lift company, which can cover multiple communes. I think as it goes in Méribel's case, it's even more complicated because you've got two lift companies. You've got Méribel Alpina, and, what are the responsibilities of the commune?
Well, ultimately, those two lift companies have been granted access to the mountain by the commune. So that is a question for the future, whether Méribel could, like Team, take the lift company back under its management. Unlike the UK, a commune in France is run by a mayor, and unlike the UK, the mayor has a lot more devolved powers than a UK mayor. So in France, the national government will run your national health care, your economy, and your immigration policy, for example, whereas in a commune, the mayor runs everything that's local to that commune. So that could be housing and planning, schools, security and safety, refuse collection. But also in a ski resort, the economy is almost 100% tourism. And the mairie, the town hall, the commune run tourism too. So they run the tourism strategy.
In relation to the election process, am I right in saying that you effectively stand on a single ticket led by that mayoral candidate that you mentioned, who in this case was Bernard Front?
Correct. So you can have as many, whoever wants to run can run, and they put together a team of 18 potential councillors. In other resorts, there's been 3 teams, 4 teams, whatever. In our election, there was only 2 teams. It was the current mayor at the time, Thierry Monnet, running against Bernard Front, and the two respective teams. And then depending on the share of the vote, a number of that team gets in. So in our case, we won pretty much the landslide victory with 70%. So we got a good 16 of our team in, and Thierry then gets 2 spots for his team, which was himself and his assistant mayor from the last mandate got in. So we're sharing the council with them. He's not turned up to a single council meeting yet, but
Can I ask then, how did you get on that ticket? Did Monsieur Front ask you directly? Is that how that works?
Yes, very much. He asked me to come to a meeting under the guise of telling me about his campaign and what he was proposing. Then asked me to another meeting, then another meeting. At the third meeting, he asked me to join his team.
Right, interesting. And you don't necessarily know then, based on how you explained how that election works, the number of candidates, places on the council get allocated based on the percentage votes. You don't even necessarily know if you're on the ticket that you will get a place on the council.
Correct. It's quite risky, especially as the old mayor is our neighbour as well. So, yeah, I mean, obviously I'm still pally with him is the problem there. What you do is you organise the list. It's called the list. So you organise a list in pecking order. So you go give everyone a number. And so I was number 9 or 10, I can't remember now, but it was kind of obvious I was going to get in. But some of the people down the lower end of the list, yeah, they knew they probably wouldn't get in.
Right, okay. And you said that Monsieur Frontenay brought you in for a few discussions. I read his campaign slogan was, I think it's Agissons ensemble, transformons demain. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Act together, transform tomorrow, which I really liked. You know, a lot of political slogans out there and working together to change the future. Have you been tasked with a particular role to transform tomorrow?
The main focus of my appointment is tourism. So tourism is like a state within a state. And within the Tourism Commission, that's split out into promotions, communications, events, etc., etc. And I'm across all of those commissions. And so now we're looking to reopen tourism to the local business population and population at large in a big dialogue about the strategy moving forward.
Now, that is super interesting. I mean, you mentioned that the economy in a ski resort is almost 100% driven from tourism. So evidently that is a really significant role. And you also referred to Teen, who recently took back control, let's say, to use another political phrase, of their lift system to give themselves more agency in terms of how they were going to run it. So there are some massive decisions to be made, particularly I think as well, I mentioned the train earlier, people thinking about sustainability policy with everything that's going on as far as the future is concerned. Do you have any particular ideas that you'd like to bring to the table?
I mean, I do. But as I said, we're working on an open dialogue with the rest of the business community and the population at large. And so I can create initiatives. I'm very much into digital transformation, but it does depend on what feedback we get from the population at large. Sustainability is high at my agenda, but it already is on our agenda here anyway, I would say. And so it's just making sure we're true to that, really. So I think I feel like when I talk to people around here, I'm in step with what people are saying. And it feels like Bernard, the mayor, is in step with that too. So I don't think this process is going to be too fractious. I think it's going to be quite a collegiate kind of atmosphere that we're going to be able to move forward together. I genuinely feel that at this stage.
That's great. I mean, evidently you had a large majority, so there's a suggestion that the electorate are behind you. What about other communes? Do you work closely with them? Because in the Three Valleys, a linked area, there must be some kind of continuity in policy between you all.
Yeah, firstly, there's a marketing division that I think you work with a little bit, is the Three Valleys Association. So that does link the Three Valleys from a marketing and communications perspective. But all the communes, so there are in bodies. So for planning and for town planning, for example, there's the SCOT, which is the whole of the Tarentaise area. All the mayors come together to devise a regional housing plan, as it were, for stuff like schools and transport and things like that. There's something called the COM, where the more local, the ones nearest us, the local communes nearest to us, all come together every 2 weeks to to collaborate on stuff like that.
I mentioned the train earlier, and you mentioned how the mayors from the different communes collaborate and have worked together. And I know that across the Tarentaise, there's been a strong movement of the different mayors trying to increase the amount of train travel options to the Tarentaise. Is that something that's on your radar as well?
It's on my personal radar, Ian. I haven't took a flight to London for, I don't know, it must be 6 or 7 years now. I always get the train now, and I watch your reports on stuff like that. And I'm a massive fan of night trains as well. I love the fact that you can sleep and get somewhere and not waste the whole day. I love it. I love the excitement of it. I used to Interrail when I was younger. So we're yet to talk about that as a subject. We're only 100 days in, but it's definitely on my radar for sure. And it's definitely within the sustainability scope of how to maybe encourage more of our tourists to come by train. But I think that's where it starts, as well as putting on more trains. But I think there needs to be some kind of, campaign in order to encourage train travel for tourists, for sure.
Cool. Okay, well, we'll follow that. Long-term listeners will remember that back in episode 190, we covered the history of Méribel with David Lindsay. And anyone who listened to that will know that the British connection goes back right to the founding of the resort. So I've got one final question for you. Is it not a bit surprising it's taken this long for a Brit to join the council?
Well, the last mayor did 3 terms, so like 21, 22 years.
Wow.
Okay. So it's a bit surprising that no one else has got in, let alone a Brit to the council. But obviously now, since Brexit, your British passport doesn't get you can't run. I'm lucky in that I have a second passport. I have an Italian passport. And Sam, who also got elected, did her naturalization. So she's got a French passport. So, yeah, I mean, you say it's surprising, but we, as a whole, we were surprised that that the mayor was in for so long and that we couldn't budge him.
Well, he's out now. The new administration is in, and we look forward to following how that goes. And I really appreciate you sharing with us how that process worked and what you're going to be doing to transform tomorrow. That's brilliant, Rich. We're just going to move towards the end of the show now. I love getting feedback from our listeners. Let me know what you've enjoyed so far, or if you have ideas for future features. You can leave a comment on Spotify, Instagram, or Facebook. Our handle is @theski-podcast, or you can drop me an email to theskipodcast@gmail.com. We're also on WhatsApp. I release exclusive material there ahead of each episode. You can look in the show notes for all those links. Bit of feedback since our last episode. Colin Tierney said, great to hear from David Webster in episode 317. I've used his videos before for Chamonix research. David is Chamonix Ski Bum on YouTube. Robbie Mill referred to episode 118 when Rob Rees joined us to discuss Pila. He said, I went to Aosta and skied in Pila at Christmas and New Year. It's underrated. A great little resort, lovely runs, and really good to see more investment going in there. If you do enjoy the Ski Podcast and you want to help out, you're very welcome to buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/the Ski Podcast. I'd like to thank Louise Cotter for doing just that. She said, binge listening to past episodes of the Ski Podcast has been my favourite way to cool down during the UK heatwave. She also mentioned episode 319 about Ronin skis. Jono's commitment to sustainability is exceptionally impressive, and that is so true. And if you don't know what Louise is referring to, then you should catch up with episode 319. I like most of my Chamonix Stories series. It's less than 20 minutes long, and it's well worth it. There are now 320 episodes of the Ski Podcast to catch up with. 111 of those were listened to in the last week alone. A listener, if you're new to the podcast, or if you just want to think about the snow again in the midst of this heat, then just go to theskipodcast.com. Have a search around the tags and categories, and you are bound to find something you'll find of interest to listen to. I can also tell you that people listen to the Ski Podcast across the world. While most of our listeners are in the UK, in the last week, 19% were in North America, 8% down under in Australia and New Zealand, and everyone else spread as far and wide as Azerbaijan, Ghana, and Venezuela. And right, that is it for this week. The Ski Podcast will be back next week with our 6th and last of our Chamonix stories, when I find out from Sam Haddad what it's like to fall into a crevasse on your first ever descent of the Vallée Blanche. For now, I'd like to thank my guest today. Alex, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And Rich, thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Good to see you again.
And finally, listener, thank you for joining us wherever in the world you're listening right now. And until next time, goodbye.